They lowered the stage lights as if to spare me. I could still feel the audience behind the dark, their attention a thick, invisible cloud that settled on my shoulders. On the last notes, my hands trembled so badly that my fingers hammered the keys in a broken, frantic pattern, a mess instead of music, shame instead of achievement. Maestro Rixai stood at the back of the auditorium with his arms folded and a jury lined up in front, waiting for a future pianist to show promise. Instead, I gave them a public breaking. At 19, I was still supposed to believe in possibility. Instead, I stared at my hands afterward, burning with humiliation. The jury gave critiques with polite, measured voices, but Rixai's jaw was too tight. I could read failure in the silence between words. My mother's face out in the fourth row, pale, proud, then stricken, stabbed through me. I wanted to vanish. Afterward, backstage, I could hear laughter from a back corridor. Not cruel exactly, but with a lilt that excluded me. Chi peccato, what a shame, one girl said. She could have just stuck to the small pieces. Chopin is for someone else, came another. Those words slithered into me and nestled there. The music college still let me keep my spot, but my own confidence, that hidden reservoir I'd called forth since childhood, trickled dry. The embarrassment wasn't just public. It was tribal, cemented in the way my family closed ranks. At dinners, my Uncle Mario shrugged with forced resignation. There is nothing wrong, Gaia, with being realistic. At home, crammed between crumbling stucco and orange-tiled roofs just north of Trastevere, I grew to hate the piano lid's polished reflection and the practices that felt like slow punishments. My mother stopped pushing, and I dropped out halfway through the next year. Rome's winter that year was especially wet. I'd cross Piazza Trilussa with notes of the last failed recital spinning in my head, and the string lights strung above vendors looked dull. There I decided I didn't want to play piano ever again. What replaced music was, at first, wandering. Long evenings with my headphones on, letting electronic beats and synth textures fill the space where Rachmaninoff and Debussy once lived. I remember a night at the central station, a robot gliding along the platform, a cleaning bot with a stubby head and blue-lit sensors. I watched it, hypnotized, while the city bustled and trains called out their arrivals. How the robot navigated, dodging dropped suitcases and inattentive shoes, struck me as a quiet marvel. It was not beauty or bravura, the things music demanded of me, but something different. The robot's sense of purpose was absolute, and it failed or succeeded by simple, programmable rules. The next days at home, I watched videos of the cleaning bots moving through airports and stations. One night I stayed up until dawn, learning about pathfinding algorithms and sensor arrays, submerging in a world of circuit boards and logic. My mother found me surrounded by pages of sketches, grand, wild attempts to build something better. Robots, she asked, in that practiced tone parents use when confronted with the unfamiliar. You are really not going to try again with the music? I shook my head, too tired to rehearse my justifications. They didn't want explanations. The neighbors, the uncles, my old music teachers, they gathered in the kitchen over espresso and shook their heads. A cousin whispered, she thinks she can be the next Ada Lovelace. They said it was a phase. They called it eccentricity, like a fever I would sweat out. And every time my new obsession came up at a family gathering, there was a little flinch around the table, relief that I'd failed at piano, worry that I'd fail again now, rendering my dreams a family legend. I climbed my way through university entrance exams, clinging to every last bit of savings and some scholarships. The engineering campus in San Lorenzo was bright, all glass and steel. Here at least failure was an accepted part of the process. No one whispered when a prototype exploded, no one tutted when code crashed, deadlines mattered more than bravado. It didn't matter that my family rolled their eyes behind my back, or that the same neighbors who once attended my recitals now smiled thinly whenever the subject of una ragazza robotica came up. For 3 years I fought to stay afloat. I took night shifts at a bakery, wiping powdered sugar from my forearms as I scribbled notes in class the next morning, fueled by cheap coffee and resentment. I worked harder than before, filled with a tight, bright purpose because no one thought I could. My designs improved, simple robots, efficient, precise, small successes, a prototype that could pick tomatoes without squashing them, a sensor array that could see ripeness by color. Every win meant nothing to my family, though. To them, engineering was anonymous, invisible. Genius was measured by applause and bouquets, not by the hum of circuit boards. In the last year of university, there was a contest, La Nuova Città, that challenged young engineers to create an autonomous robot that could navigate the old cobblestone streets, pick up litter, and communicate with locals. I poured everything into it, writing code until my brain buzzed and soldering late into the evenings in the lab. My robot was a squat, sturdy thing, round as a bread loaf and painted in cheerful red and gold. I named it Ottavio. When Ottavio won, there was still no invitation to celebrate from home. My mother sent a text, "Congrats." My uncle added a line about how it might at least get you a real job. My family's skepticism felt like a constant undertow, threatening to sweep away my progress. But the robot video went viral. A city councillor found me in an empty classroom, shoes squeaking on the linoleum, and offered the promise of funding, real backing. For the first time, I was the centre of an offer and not a letdown. Graduation came and went. I got a job at a young startup across the river, helping to build robots that restored monuments, tiny machines that could gently clean and inspect the worn marble of fountains and ancient sculptures. It was delicate work for sturdy machines. Each day I walked past the Pantheon and wondered at the birds perched on its rim. I learned patience, and I learned to trust the quiet satisfaction that comes from fixing something carefully, perfectly. 3 years later, on the morning of the most important demonstration of my career, Rome was a city drunk on sunlight. The Tiber was gilded by the hour, tourists trailed like ants across the bridges, and I kept remembering that long-ago debacle at the recital. My hands felt steady now but haunted by memory. These hands, I thought, could not fail again. The demonstration was for the Office of Cultural Heritage, big clients with ancient faces. They gathered in Piazza Navona, a cluster of officials peering over clipboards beside worn statues. I stood beside Ottavio, the newest iteration, sleeker and brighter than before. His shell gleamed. My old professors were invited. Some of them came, news cameras gathered in knots. My mother and uncle stood behind the rope barrier, faces composed. There were neighbors there too. I recognized the priest's housekeeper from my old street and two girls I had played music with years ago. I trembled, but not from fear. Grief lapped at the edge of my thoughts, the lost years of music, the lateness of this second act. At the same time, a cold clarity thrilled through me. There could be beauty in function, even if applause came in the form of work completed. The demonstration started. I stepped forward, describing the robot in direct, simple terms, no poetry, just the practical. Ottavio understands the difference between moss and marble. He senses cracks invisible to the eye. With his 3 brush types and vacuum, he can lift a century of dust without damage. Skepticism was plain in the faces of the officials. My uncle, arms crossed, caught my eye and gave a tilt of his chin that was pure distilled challenge. One of the neighbors, a woman with dark eyes sharpened by gossip, smirked openly. I started the sequence. Ottavio rolled forward, paused at the foot of the fountain of the 4 rivers. I had mapped its journey to the centimeter, iterated every gesture. The robot lifted its tiny articulated arm, deployed the softest brush, and began to clean the foot of the statue. The ancient marble, caked dull by years of city grime, revealed its glinting edge. The crowd shifted, all curiosity now, the cameras whirring as my robot hummed and worked, algorithms firing invisibly. I talked as Ottavio worked. Explained every function, the way sensors mapped relief, the delicate software puzzle behind touch that mimicked human pressure but never overstepped. Each sentence drew questions from the officials, serious inquiries. I answered plainly, refusing panic. I felt exposed, no more feet to hide behind, no maestro to rescue me. If I failed now, it would be my own undoing. The sun slanted through colonnades. Ottavio paused at the fountain's basin, then deployed a tiny nozzle and gently rinsed away foam. The crowd murmured. The priest's housekeeper's mouth rounded in surprise. The girls I knew from music school began to film. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Incredible." But it was my family I was watching. My mother, pressed to the barrier, frowned in concentration. My uncle had uncrossed his arms. Then came the true test. A section of the marble with a deep, nearly invisible fissure. Narrating, I explained that the robot would test for potential expansion, using not just sensors, but a small injection of colorless dye to show the path of the crack. Ottavio did this without error, mapping the fissure and projecting its shape onto a tablet for everyone to see. The officials bent forward, murmuring approval. My uncle, usually unflappable, blinked rapidly. It was not a big reaction, no applause, no shouts of pride, but he stepped forward as if to understand better. My mother's face softened, her mouth opening just a bit as she reached for her phone. She was recording. After the sequence finished, an official turned to me and said with formal respect, "It can be integrated into the restoration program." Around me the crowd broke into applause, not wild, not long, but the kind that contained respect. I felt breathless but not lightheaded. It was just a moment, but in it the tangled knot of past failures untied thread by thread. Afterward, as Ottavio was wheeled away for maintenance, my uncle approached me along the edge of the crowd. His steps were unsure at first. He surveyed the robot's work, the gleaming stretch of marble. He cleared his throat. "I did not believe," he said softly in Italian. "But this," he gestured, helpless at first then precisely, "is real work. This is something no one in our family has done before." It was not outright pride, but it was surrender. My mother hugged me. For the first time since childhood, her arms were not weighted with expectation or disappointment, just warmth. "For all those years I hoped you would play the piano again," she whispered. "But this, it is good, Gaia, very good." Some neighbors congratulated me with the half-awkward, half-astonished warmth of people seeing someone they had mentally dismissed prove them wrong. The priest's housekeeper, who had once called my robot "your little Frankenstein," patted my elbow and said, "Brava, ragazza." Even Rixai, my old maestro, was there, a little apart from the crowd, coat wrapped tight. He nodded. "There is a kind of music in what you have built," he said. His words did not sting, they rang clean like acceptance. Days passed and articles spread, photos of Ottavio at work, my name attached finally to something that made sense to everyone. The phone at my mother's flat rang with congratulations, invitations, even requests for advice. The dinner table filled with new discussions, not about past failures, but about what could come next. I visited Nonna's grave that week. The cemetery was quiet, the stone warm beneath my hands. I told her what I had done, not in grand, self-congratulatory terms, but plainly. How the city's oldest monuments had been made a little newer, how my hands played a different kind of instrument now. I walked home that evening through the fountains and alleyways, the city alive with dusk. Passing by the old music school, I listened to a student's uneven notes trailing out the open windows, struggling through Chopin just as I had once. My grief was smaller. I knew what I had gained in the ruins. Home now meant a place where my work was valued. My family, once so sure that dreams could only look one way, adjusted. At dinner, my uncle asked real questions about machine learning. The neighbors no longer snickered when I passed. My mother, when the subject of the robot came up, smiled and said, "It's her invention. She made it work. In Rome, in our streets." Every morning after, I caught myself feeling lighter, more rooted, each step echoing on the ancient stones. The city had given me memory and pain, and at last, a new place for my dreams. I was not the pianist they wanted, but I had come home, successful on my own terms, my robots humming quietly through Rome like prayers fulfilled.